Okay, in this next section, we're going to take these initial letters that we had and we're going to use modifiers in our modifier panel to extrude and bevel those shapes that we created, and then also use what's called a smooth modifier to help smooth them out. And we're going to talk a lot about the different settings that are inside of the bevel parameters, as well as the modifier stack in general, how to use the smooth modifier, and also the difference between an instanced modifier and a non-instanced modifier. Okay, so to take these shapes and make them into 3D objects, we're going to apply a modifier to them. So let's select all of our objects by simply left-clicking and drawing a box around all 4 of them. And you'll see in the modifier panel here, in the command panel on the right-hand side of your screen, that we have the names section says 4 shapes selected. If I just select one shape, it'll give me a name, and it actually shows all the parameters and everything because we have access to this text tool still. But if I select all 4 of them, I don't have any options down here, and I just have 4 shapes selected. So what I want to do in order to be able to create a 3D object out of all of these objects is to use the modifier list by clicking the down arrow here and going to the Bevel Modifier right here. Okay? And this adds a modifier on top of the text tools that we saw earlier. Now, we still don't see the text tools here, but again, if I select just one letter, we could modify the text underneath it. So if I were to make this bigger, or if I could even change this to a different font, and it would actually update the bevel above it. And that's the power of the modifier stack in 3D Studio Max, is that you're able to do those kinds of edits as you're working. There are some pitfalls, and we describe a lot about how all of this works in some of the more advanced classes here. But for now, if I can remember which font to put on here, we're just going to utilize all 4 of these at the same time and apply a bevel modifier to them. Now to see them in 3D, we're just going to press P on our keyboard, and that's going to change our top view into a perspective view, as you can see here on the left side of my screen. And then we're just going to hold Alt and use our middle mouse button to orbit around so that we see the objects in 3D. Now by default the bevel doesn't do very much, but we're going to change some of its bevel values here to create 3D objects. So what we're going to do is we're going to start at level 1 and we're going to give this a value of 0.5. And we're going to give the outline a value of 0.5 as well. And what you can see here is that that's extruded that out and created a sort of a beveled face there for us to use for the bottom of our letters. And as you can see, it's applied it to all 4 objects at the same time. Next, I'm going to, just to demonstrate the power of adding the modifier to all 4 objects at the same time, by simply selecting the 3, and you'll notice that the bevel is in italics, and this means that it's affecting more objects than just the object that you have selected. So when I go to add level 2 and I add this to be 6, you can see that it actually changes all of the objects in my scene. Again, because this is what's called an instanced modifier. It's the same instance of that modifier is applied to all of these objects. So when I change it on one of them, it changes it on all 4 of them. And then finally, we'll just go down to level 3 and we'll just do 0.5 for the height and negative 0.5 for the bevel, and that brings it back in. And if I press F3 on my keyboard, I should see this nice beveled font now extruded up. And I have a nice set of 3D objects here that says I love 3D, right? Let's go ahead and come down here and modify this a little bit if you want. You can just change this to 12, so you can see that that's kind of powerful that you can just continue to edit this however you want. Again, as I explained earlier, if I came down here to the text modifier and I could change this to a different font and it would update all of that for me. Now there are some pitfalls with how this works, but for this project, simply enough, this works out just fine. So let's go back up. Unfortunately, Control Z does not redo the font selection, but I'll just change that to Arial Black, and there we have our I Love 3D. Now if you're looking closely, you might notice that there's a little bit of an issue with the heart here, where I get this smoothing issue where it's kind of got these lines right in the middle there. That should be the only area of my font that is problematic. And I'm just using the Alt middle mouse button technique again to just orbit around and check all the different areas of my text, but it looks like just that heart is the problem. But what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and select all of those objects again. We can also just hit Control A to select all of our objects. And we're going to add another modifier on top of this, and the modifier that we're going to add is called Smooth. So we're going to just click on the down arrow in our modifier list, and we're just going to bring our mouse down into the objects below the object space modifiers and just type in S. Or just press the letter S, and that'll kind of bring us down alphabetically into the S's, and we can just click on the Smooth modifier. Now if I deselect everything, you'll see that it's kind of made everything worse initially, and everything's very faceted now, like all of the different extruded edges of the D and the heart are all visible. So we're just going to simply select one of our objects and just go to AutoSmooth in the Smooth modifier. And as you can see, that's actually pretty much solved all of our problems. Now, I usually, with these kinds of 3D fonts, just go ahead and put this up to 44.9. Basically 0.1 less than 45, because the bevel is 45 and we want that sort of hard edge there on the bevel, but we don't want it anywhere else. So you can just do that by using 44.9. So that's the Smooth modifier, and that just helps us smooth that face out and get that heart looking nice and smooth and 3D. Okay, so that wraps up this section where we basically took these simple 2D shapes and beveled them and extruded them to be 3D shapes, and then used the Smooth modifier to add some smoothing to the objects to solve any of the smoothing issues that we might have had based on the font that we used. And again, to achieve this, we added the Bevel modifier to the objects, which gives us bevel values that we can adjust, and we can increase or decrease the height at any time that we want to. We can go down to our text, remember, and we could even change this if we like 3R better than 3D. We could change that. Obviously, just leave this at 3D. We can always just change the font later on if we wanted to. So lots of power in this modifier stack approach that 3D Studio Max uses. We can also change the bevel parameters to be any size we want. So if we wanted these to be really tall, we could make them really tall. Or if we wanted them to be really small, we could make them really small as well. Nice thin letters if you like. I like them to be kind of bulky, but obviously not as tall as I had them a moment ago. So lots of power in this modifier stack approach. You can edit and modify the values of a lot of the different modifiers, and a lot of these modifiers can be used to create extrudes and bevels, and in this case we use the Smooth modifier to help fix one of the issues that we had here with the smoothing of the heart in this section right here.